I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming our neighbor, the depth of our friendship, and then these opportunities that we both have.
The air shimmered with the scent of luxury, yet inside Beverly Hills' most exclusive Chanel boutique, tension crackled like electricity. Meghan Markle stepped forward, expecting discretion, only to meet an unyielding wall of silence and security. No manager, no apology. Her disbelief ignited into fury within moments. Was this a punishment for a failed collaboration, the fallout from leaked emails, or a far darker intrigue within Paris's elite fashion circle? What unfolded next would shock insiders and send tremors through the global fashion world. The velvet line that would not part. On February 7, 2026, the calm rhythm of North Rodeo Drive shifted in a way few could have anticipated. The Chanel flagship in Beverly Hills stood as it always had: polished glass, muted elegance, and the quiet confidence of a brand that rarely needed to explain itself. Into that stillness arrived Meghan Markle, stepping out of a black Cadillac Escalade alongside her assistant, Greta Yu, and stylist in training, Eliza Morrow. The visit did not appear unusual. For years, entrances like this had unfolded smoothly, often accompanied by private greetings and discreet access. But this time, the choreography broke. Before Meghan could reach the iconic double C doors, two security personnel moved forward in unison. Their posture was firm, but not aggressive, their tone controlled. There was no confusion in their eyes, no hurried whispers into earpieces. One of them delivered a single measured sentence. They had been instructed not to facilitate access. The words landed without embellishment. No apology, no suggestion of a temporary misunderstanding, just a boundary. Meghan paused, visibly taken aback but still composed. She explained that she had an ongoing arrangement with Chanel's global director and asked that they verify it. The expectation in her voice suggested this was a matter that could be corrected with a quick check inside. Yet the response came just as steady as before. The instruction applied across regions. Across regions. It was a phrase that changed everything. This was not a local oversight by a Beverly Hills manager. It was not a scheduling mix-up. It was something larger, something already decided beyond California. For a brief moment, she stood motionless, phone in hand, processing the implication that the decision extended far beyond Rodeo Drive. Then she called Prince Harry. Witnesses nearby began to notice the shift. A staff member observing from the entrance of Dior described how she started pacing along the storefront, her movements sharp, deliberate. The initial composure began to thin. Her posture stiffened. Her gestures grew more pronounced. The quiet elegance of the street now felt tense.
Certainly after the pandemic and everything else, we crave that. We crave being able to go high and
Charged with a kind of invisible standoff. Greta Yu and Eliza Morrow remained close, but there was little they could do. The security team did not waver. They did not escalate. They simply held their position in front of the doors. As the minutes passed, frustration surfaced more clearly. According to an eyewitness, her voice, though controlled, carried an edge. At one point, she was heard saying that they would regret this. It was no longer the tone of someone clarifying a misunderstanding. It was the reaction of someone confronting a closed door that would not reopen. Around her, the street continued its luxury routine. Shoppers moving between Valentino and Fendi, cameras discreetly raised, murmurs spreading. Yet at the center of it all stood an unmistakable reality. Chanel's doors were not opening. And what made the moment heavier still was the growing realization that this was not spontaneous. It was not emotional. It was procedural. Somewhere, long before she stepped out of the Escalade, the decision had already been made. And what if Chanel's closed doors weren't sudden, but decided long before she arrived? Who made the call, and why the silence? Keep watching. When silence became the statement. The realization that the refusal was global did not immediately send her away. Instead, it seemed to root her in place. The doors behind the security guards remained closed, the polished glass reflecting the afternoon light, and the small crowd beginning to gather at a careful distance. North Rodeo Drive was no stranger to spectacle, but this felt different. It was restrained, almost eerily quiet, until it wasn't. Meghan did not step back. She stayed. What followed unfolded over the next several minutes in full public view. Rather than retreat, she shifted tactics. She raised her phone and began recording herself, angling it toward the boutique entrance, toward the guards, toward the symbol of the interlocking double C that now stood as an immovable barrier. Her gestures became sharper. At one point, she pointed directly at the doors as she spoke into the camera, her expression tightening between disbelief and anger. Bystanders noticed. A few paused. Others discreetly lifted their own phones.
40 friends to donate 40 minutes of their time to help mentor a woman who's mobilizing back into the workforce.
Short clips began circulating almost instantly. In one of them, she appears to mouth the words, "You don't know who I am." The footage spread quickly, analyzed and replayed before the moment had even ended. What might once have remained a private dispute had now shifted into something undeniably public. The security personnel did not respond. They did not argue. They did not attempt to escort her away. They simply held their positions. The silence from inside the store was striking. No manager emerged. No explanation was offered beyond what had already been said. At some point during the standoff, she reportedly named a Chanel regional director aloud, accusing him of corporate bullying and ethical cowardice within earshot of passers-by. The statement was bold, deliberate. It suggested she believed pressure, public pressure, might force a reversal. Yet the doors remained closed. Prince Harry arrived soon after, dressed casually, his posture tense but controlled. Witnesses described him as restrained, focused not on confrontation but on ending the scene. He approached her directly, speaking quietly. "We need to go now," he said. His words were firm but measured, carrying the weight of someone who understood how quickly moments like this could spiral. For a brief instant, she resisted. Her body language suggested she was not ready to accept what had happened.
And I think a lot of that gets lost in what can be super dehumanizing when you look at the clickbait culture.
But the reality in front of her did not shift. The guards did not move. The boutique did not open. The silence from Chanel was absolute. Eventually, she relented. They left together, without the doors ever parting. Later that evening, an internal Slack message circulated among Chanel's senior client managers worldwide. It was short and clear. If questioned, refer to standard client protocols. Do not comment externally. The position remained unchanged. There would be no public explanation, no dramatic statement from the House of Chanel. In luxury fashion, silence can carry more force than argument. And as the videos continued to circulate online, one truth became harder to ignore. This confrontation on North Rodeo Drive had not been a spontaneous decision made at street level. It was the visible outcome of something already settled long before that afternoon, something determined weeks earlier in Paris. Now, as silence replaces statements, was the Rodeo Drive confrontation merely theater for a decision already sealed weeks earlier in Paris? Stay glued. The decision made in Paris. The silence on North Rodeo Drive was not born in California. It had been shaped weeks earlier, thousands of miles away, inside Chanel's historic headquarters at Rue Cambon in Paris. Long before February 7, 2026, before the closed doors in Beverly Hills and the viral clips, a final determination had already been sealed behind discreet boardroom walls. In December, senior leadership at Chanel signed off on what insiders describe as one of the rarest internal measures the House can invoke. The approval came from Bruno Pavlovsky, president of Chanel's fashion division, alongside other senior decision-makers within the privately held company. The action carried a formal internal designation: retrait définitif, final withdrawal. It was not a temporary suspension. It was not a cooling-off period. It was definitive. Within Chanel's corporate language, such terminology is reserved for extreme circumstances. It signals a complete severance of engagement across all boutiques, showrooms, events, and private appointments worldwide. No regional discretion, no quiet exceptions.
I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming our...
The instruction would apply equally in Beverly Hills, Paris, London, and beyond. The path to that December sign-off began with the compilation of a detailed dossier by Chanel's Brand Integrity Unit. According to sources familiar with the process, the file was extensive. It included internal communications, external media patterns, and documentation from prior interactions. 3 primary concerns were cited. First, reputational volatility. Executives reportedly flagged a pattern of public controversies that, in their view, introduced unpredictable risk into a house built on heritage and control. Chanel, like other legacy brands, measures its partnerships carefully. Stability is currency. Second, co-creative credit demands tied to the proposed 2023 capsule collaboration. During discussions that year, requests for shared authorship and public positioning reportedly raised red flags within the company. Chanel has long guarded its creative authority as central to its identity. The idea of diluting that authorship, even symbolically, was viewed as incompatible with its structure. Third, what was described internally as attempted influence over creative direction. Leadership concluded that the approach crossed from collaboration into pressure. For a fashion house that defines itself through continuity and discipline, that perception carried weight. By February 1st, 2026, weeks after the December approval, a formal memo circulated within Chanel's Americas division. It labeled Meghan Markle as a Tier 1 non-engaged persona. The classification was clear and procedural. Staff were instructed not to initiate contact, not to schedule appointments, and not to provide accommodations. The directive applied across regions. In practical terms, she had become persona non grata within the brand's ecosystem. What unfolded in Beverly Hills was therefore not a spontaneous rebuff by security staff. It was the visible enforcement of a strategic containment decision already ratified at the highest levels of the company. There had been no emotional outburst inside Rue Cambon, no public debate, only deliberation, documentation, and a signature. The contrast between street-level confrontation and boardroom calculation is stark. On Rodeo Drive, the moment felt personal and raw. In Paris, it had been methodical. And as investigators began tracing the timeline backward, one reality grew increasingly clear. The rupture did not begin in 2026. The fracture line had formed much earlier, long before the doors in Beverly Hills refused to open. So how did a Beverly Hills standoff trace back to secret Paris boardrooms, revealing a hidden fracture years before luxury doors slammed shut? The mood board war revealed. By early 2023, subtle fractures had begun to appear beneath the polished surface of luxury. Nothing public or dramatic, just a shift in tone, a hesitation in emails, a tightening of language in meetings. The tension lived quietly beneath immaculate branding, detectable only to those close enough to notice the change in rhythm. The initiative began with optimism. Vanessa Loren and Zara Carmichael moved carefully through the delicate ecosystem of influence, heritage, and brand diplomacy, presenting a proposal built on evolution rather than disruption. On paper, it promised a bridge between tradition and a rapidly changing cultural landscape, preserving legacy while softening the distance between the brand and a younger, more socially conscious audience. The idea sounded simple. The reality would prove far more complicated. On June 14, 2023, the concept stepped into the spotlight inside a glass-walled conference room in New York City. Executives gathered around a long table, laptops open and expressions carefully neutral. The first slide appeared. Reimagine Chanel, from exclusivity to empathy. The words alone carried weight. The presentation unfolded slowly.
Because it feels really inclusive and there's representation and it's just like a sweet love story.
Each slide designed to nudge rather than shock. Early sections focused on generational change, shifting consumer expectations, and the growing demand for brands to project emotional intelligence alongside craftsmanship. Research and charts softened what would follow. Then the proposals arrived. The iconic double C motif, one of the most protected symbols in luxury fashion, was suggested for subtle reinterpretation, not a redesign, the presenters stressed, but a gentle evolution. a whisper of modernity layered onto a century of heritage. Next came a line of eco-conscious handbags positioned as a statement of environmental responsibility. Each piece would be named after a historical royal woman, linking legacy to sustainability in a narrative of continuity. The presentation reached its most delicate moment when it referenced Princess Diana, acknowledging her emotional resonance while stressing the need for legal and reputational caution. For a brief moment, the room fell silent. Then the temperature shifted. What had been framed as innovation began to feel like risk. Glances passed between executives. Pens tapped against notepads. Some leaned back, arms folded. The proposals had crossed an invisible threshold separating evolution from intrusion. Within days, concern spread quickly through internal channels. Emails multiplied. Private conversations intensified. Questions surfaced faster than answers. Was the brand being asked to adapt or to compromise? Would loyal customers see thoughtful progress or unnecessary dilution? On June 26th, unease crystallized into action. An emergency meeting was called. The tone was no longer tentative but urgent and defensive. Conversations shifted from possibility to protection. How far could the house stretch without losing the identity that defined it? Could empathy coexist with exclusivity without weakening the aura that made the brand powerful? No one left with certainty. By July 1st, the decision became unmistakable. Communication on the project was abruptly cut. Email threads fell silent. Meetings disappeared from calendars. What had once carried the language of optimism dissolved into corporate stillness. For the creative team, the silence felt louder than rejection. It marked a boundary firmly reinforced. Yet silence rarely ends a story. Weeks later, a leaked mood board surfaced titled From Grief to Glamour. Its imagery blended symbolism and emotional storytelling with luxury aesthetics. Internally, the leak triggered alarms. Ethics teams flagged the breach. Investigations began, and scrutiny intensified. The project meant to build empathy now sparked heightened caution. The rupture echoed beyond a single initiative. It reflected a broader shift within the luxury industry. As influencer-driven branding surged, heritage houses quietly pivoted toward protection and restraint. The rise of quiet luxury would reject overt celebrity alignment in favor of safeguarding legacy. The episode became a real-time case study. Modern reinterpretation colliding with historical guardianship, innovation pressing against tradition, speed clashing with patience. In trying to reconcile empathy with exclusivity, the house found itself at a crossroads, forced to confront the tension between the future it was being asked to embrace and the past it was determined to preserve. But could a single leaked mood board trigger Paris to close ranks, proving legacy still outruns innovation inside luxury's most guarded empire? Stay tuned. Paris closes ranks. The tremors that began in New York reverberated quickly across Paris, sending shockwaves through the tightly knit world of French haute couture. What had once seemed a contained internal dispute at a single house now threatened to ripple across the entire industry. By early February 2024, whispers of unease had transformed into a strategic consensus. On February 9th, the Comité Colbert convened a discreet roundtable, gathering key figures from the nation's most revered luxury houses. The agenda was clear yet unspoken, contain the fallout, safeguard reputations, and delineate the limits of association. The language used was precise. Any public alignment risked what they quietly termed PR contamination, a designation that could reverberate through months, even years, of brand equity. The reactions from Parisian peers were swift and deliberate. Dior, maintaining a historically poised detachment, began quietly pulling back from any visible connection. Its distancing, measured yet unmistakable. Balmain, previously eager to engage with digital feminism initiatives, abruptly canceled an upcoming feature, signaling a retreat into caution. Even Givenchy, known for its careful diplomacy, declined engagement outright. Each move, executed with understated efficiency, sent a message. The city's elite would prioritize collective discretion over individual innovation. As the calendar turned to March, the stakes became unavoidable. Paris Fashion Week, scheduled from March 4th to 11th, approached under a cloud of uncertainty. The provisional guest lists were revealing.
In celebrating the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in your country.
The house at the center of controversy found itself conspicuously absent, a stark contrast against the glittering tapestry of designers and influencers poised to fill the venues. French press headlines captured the tension with measured sharpness, painting the silence not as oversight, but as deliberate strategy. Analysts and fashion commentators dissected every nuance. The absence spoke louder than any runway reveal could. Within this atmosphere, the concept of silence as strategy took root. For Paris, the choice was not merely tactical, it was philosophical. Luxury, after decades of aligning heritage with visibility, had recalibrated. In a city where legacy is both shield and currency, discretion became a defensive art. Every public action, every collaboration considered, was weighed against potential ripples across the interconnected ecosystem of houses, ateliers, and media. By choosing silence, the industry signaled cohesion, reaffirming that reputations, once carefully curated over decades, were not to be jeopardized lightly. The visuals accompanying the unfolding drama were as potent as the decisions themselves. Outside the iconic Rue Cambon address, the streets were unusually subdued, the façade of the maison glowing under soft afternoon light. The subtle signage read "Entrée sur invitation," a quiet reinforcement of exclusivity. Passers-by sensed that the doors were open, yet the access was controlled, almost guarded, an elegant metaphor for the city's broader posture.
It happened a few weeks ago, earlier this month, here at our cottage.
Inside, the corridors buzzed with the low hum of internal deliberation as executives navigated the delicate balance between tradition and the encroaching demands of modernity. This collective pause in Paris, however, was more than a mere response to a single controversy. It reflected a recalibration of the industry itself, a moment where legacy, discretion, and brand stewardship were reaffirmed as non-negotiable. As the world watched, the silence of the city's ateliers carried weight, shaping perceptions far beyond the cobblestone streets and gilded interiors of the houses themselves. Now, what did Paris's sudden silence truly signal? Damage control for one scandal, or a secret industry pact reshaping luxury's future forever? Stay with us. The salvage strategy. As the echoes of Paris's strategic silence settled, attention shifted back to the battleground of New York, where legal and public relations defenses were rapidly mobilized. The first cracks of a counterattack appeared on February 8th, when a high-stakes call convened with Jonathan Y., a legal strategist known for navigating complex corporate disputes. The discussion was direct, methodical, and urgent. Proposed claims, defamation, discrimination, and interference were drafted with precision, intended to push back against mounting scrutiny and perceived internal attack. Yet, even in the midst of urgency, expert voices quickly cast doubt. Legal advisors pointed out the low viability of such cases. The potential risks far outweighed any conceivable benefit. By February 10th, the lawsuit was quietly shelved, leaving only the echoes of the attempted legal strike. Parallel to the legal maneuvering, a curated leak surfaced on February 9th, carrying the subject line, "An ongoing pattern." The timing was meticulous, signaling a subtle shift in strategy. If courts would not intervene, perception could be guided through carefully framed narratives. Within the organization, the reference to Princess Diana, a figure previously handled with caution, was weaponized internally once again. It became a touchstone in arguments over the ethics and optics of brand engagement, a reminder of both legacy and vulnerability. Yet the broader media landscape showed signs of fatigue. Coverage, once frenzied and immediate, began to flatten, the intensity of attention giving way to routine reporting. This lull created a narrow window of opportunity. Instead of reacting impulsively to every headline, the teams could recalibrate, strategically framing communications and steering the narrative towards stability. Behind the scenes, private communications revealed the unspoken frustrations of leadership. Bruno Pavlovsky, a veteran of corporate messaging, penned a candid internal note. "We cannot absorb chaos for the sake of celebrity." The remark encapsulated the internal struggle between the demands of high-profile visibility and the responsibilities of long-term brand stewardship. It was a moment of clarity, an acknowledgement that the allure of sensationalism could never justify destabilizing a house with centuries of history. The episode unfolded against a backdrop of rapid modernization in the fashion world. By 2026, brand risk analytics had transformed decision-making, equipping houses with tools to monitor and predict reputational threats in real time. AI-powered sentiment tracking became a standard, allowing PR teams to gauge consumer reactions with unprecedented granularity. Lessons from past influencer litigation cases had made retail houses increasingly risk-averse, reinforcing the culture of caution that Paris had already demonstrated. New York agencies, once eager to chase headlines, began a quiet recalibration, balancing immediacy with discretion. Every campaign, every statement was measured not only against its potential impact, but against the fragile architecture of long-term brand trust. Within this landscape, the combination of legal caution, curated leaks, and modern analytics formed a multi-layered defense, less about confrontation and more about control. The House, once buffeted by public scrutiny and internal debate, found a rhythm of resilience. Actions were deliberate, communication surgical, and visibility carefully managed. The strategy was not about erasing past mistakes, but containing their echoes, minimizing collateral damage, and preparing for the slow work of rebuilding confidence. Through this period, it became clear that the industry itself was learning alongside the House. Quietly, behind closed doors, executives, lawyers, and PR specialists were redefining the rules of engagement, how to safeguard heritage, manage crisis, and navigate a world where visibility, once a pure asset, could so easily become a liability. As the world stopped opening doors, could luxury survive transparency, or was Chanel's silent battle rewriting every rule of influence? When the world stops opening doors, the reverberations of prior legal and PR maneuvers extended far beyond the narrow corridors of luxury fashion, spilling into every public and private sphere connected to the figures at the center of controversy. By early 2026, consequences were no longer confined to corporate memos or curated leaks. They had begun reshaping careers, projects, and even personal networks. One by one, ventures stalled. A high-profile Netflix project, once anticipated to draw massive attention, was quietly placed on hold. Similarly, a Spotify partnership, initially celebrated for its potential reach, was shelved without public explanation. The ripple of hesitation spread even into philanthropy. Long-standing donors at a prominent foundation signaled fatigue, their enthusiasm muted by a combination of public scrutiny and shifting priorities. The impact was measurable in politics as well. In Canada, polling numbers reflected a subtle but unmistakable decline in favorability for associated initiatives, indicating that public perception had shifted and that prior goodwill was now being re-evaluated in light of ongoing controversies. Amid these pressures, the notion of relocation emerged as a practical, if difficult, consideration. Discussions quietly explored Canada, Australia, and Switzerland, not as impulsive retreats, but as strategic recalibrations to environments perceived as offering discretion, distance, and opportunity for measured reintegration. Harry, in particular, pursued a series of discreet inquiries with institutions abroad. The conversations were cautious, professional, and circumspect, but they carried one essential condition. Any pathway forward required reintegration without Meghan. This stipulation, communicated subtly yet clearly, underscored the challenges of reconciling public visibility with private ambitions, highlighting a personal calculus that had begun to dominate professional decisions. Even social circles began to contract under the weight of these pressures. In Montecito, once a hub of celebrity gatherings and social visibility, invitations slowed and began to disappear altogether. Stylists and consultants, previously enthusiastic collaborators, began pulling back, prioritizing reputational safety over creative opportunity. Every declined invitation, every delayed response was a quiet signal of a shrinking orbit, a once expansive network reduced to careful selectivity. Paris remained emblematic of the broader cultural shift. At the iconic Chanel boutique, the doors, which had long welcomed the world's attention with elegance and ceremony, now remained closed. Entrez sur invitation, the sign read, a simple phrase carrying weight beyond its words. In a city where luxury has always been measured by discretion and access, the absence of movement spoke volumes. It was a reminder that in couture, influence is not asserted with force. It is conveyed through subtle control, through the choice of who is allowed in and who is left waiting. This closure, however, was not sudden or dramatic. Unlike a slammed door, the effect was gradual, almost imperceptible until it became undeniable. Invitations slowed first, then appearances diminished, and finally, projects paused. The world did not turn its back with a loud gesture. It simply stopped opening doors. Social, professional, and philanthropic avenues constricted in a manner that felt both natural and inescapable. Even as connections shrank, the optics of influence remained carefully curated, ensuring that any perception of chaos was minimized while consequences quietly accumulated. For those observing from the outside, the lesson was clear. Influence, visibility, and access are fragile currencies. Careers, projects, and reputations, no matter how prominent, can stall when the network of opportunity retracts. And in a world where discretion has become as powerful as spectacle, the absence of action carries meaning equal to, if not greater than, any public confrontation. By the time the narrative reached this stage, it was evident that the strategies of Paris and New York had converged in principle, if not in method. Silence, discretion, and strategic withdrawal had become the prevailing forces, shaping outcomes. The final image was stark yet symbolic. The Chanel boutique in Paris, its doors closed, its access limited, a quiet testament to the enduring truth that in couture, doors do not slam. They simply stop opening. So, what do you think Meghan's next move will be after the world quietly closed its doors around her? Will she find a path back, or is this the end of the spotlight? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.